co-sponsor.
Thank you.
Also co-sponsored Le'ilui Nishmas Yisachar Daniel Ben Mordechai, who we know as Yisachar Brown. We are honored here to hear from Rav Reuvain Mendlowitz, who's an expert and world-renowned sofer, big Talmid Chacham and an Ana. And he speaks very clearly. It's enjoyable to listen to as you'll hear. And you should just know behind every minute he's going to speak tonight, he'll really literally speak for hours. He has so much knowledge behind it. And without further ado.
Okay. I've been warned that if I say anything at a line, I'm going to get like an electric shock every time. This says something like in between taking an EKG and being in the electric chair. Okay, so I was given a number of questions. So first of all, just as a general matter, anybody, I think in this forum can feel free to ask any question that they would like. With that in mind, there were a few questions that were put forward to get the ball rolling. So I want to start with one. I'm not going to go in order, just because it brings out a very important idea. And that is the idea of, how do you like that? It's only later on. The idea of wearing tefillin in the morning, putting on tefillin in the morning when going to shul. Okay, it's brought down that a person wakes up and is getting ready to daven, and it says in Shulchan Aruch, it's brought from the Zohar, that there's an inyan for a person not to leave his home without being enveloped, as it were, in his talis and tefillin. And I guess all of us, or the vast majority of us, are from Chutz La'aretz, and in Chutz La'aretz this halacha has fallen by the wayside. Paiskim say the reason for that is because it's not practical, it's not shaykh to walk in the streets when there are nochrim in the streets. It's just not feasible. So it's not really something that's kept too much. Here in Eretz Yisrael, though, this really it shouldn't be too difficult to do, and indeed it's something that people see often, and it's relatively common. So I just wanted to address it for a moment, just because of something that's a side point related to it, but I think brings out a very important idea. So just as a general matter, the makar, as I said, comes from the Zohar, and the Zohar says that if a person walks out of his house, passes the mezuzah wearing his talis and tefillin, so there are malachim that accompany him to shul, and the malachim that are mekatrig against the person are standing behind, as the malachim that are accompanying, the good malachim that are accompanying the person are giving him brachas. And the negative malachim, the mekatrigim, are forced to answer amen to all the brachas that the person is receiving. This is what's going on as a person comes to shul in his talis and tefillin. When a person enters shul, it's brought down, he's supposed to say the pasuk, and matayvu av eshtachave el heichal kodshecha biyirasecha. Eshtachave el heichal kodshecha biyirasecha. Biyirasecha is referring to somebody who's wearing tefillin. Because it says, V'ro kalami aretz kishem Hashem nikra alecha v'yoru mimeka. Tefillin is something that inspires awe of people. Indeed, many of us have heard, there are many stories of Gedolim. There's stories with the Ben Ish Chai, there's stories with Reb Elchanan Wasserman, the Vilna Gaon, and others about times that they were wearing tefillin when they were accosted by Nachrim in the street, and the Nachrim were stricken with panic when they saw the tefillin upon the Adam Gadol. So Rav Moshe Feinstein says that, well, before we get to Rav Moshe, so what are the heterim? Why is it that some people are not makbid on this halacha? So one of the heterim that's brought down is because sometimes the streets are not, especially in this country, more so than in Chutz La'aretz actually, there's mamish, there are these huge dumpsters, and they give off a reyach, and sometimes it could be a shaila to walk past such a thing wearing talis and tefillin. So the Paiskim say that there's an eitzah for that. A person can cover the talis and tefillin. And there's actually a machlokes achreinim. What's preferable? Is it preferable to put on tefillin at home, knowing that someone's going to be passing through what's called mevayos hamitunafos, and just cover the tefillin, and that solves the problem? Or is it preferable to not put on the tefillin at home, rather go to shul without the talis and tefillin because of this problem of the mevayos hamitunafos, and put them on in the courtyard of the shul? That's, by the way, just an important idea as well. Even if somebody's not able to put on the tefillin at home, he still ideally should put on the tefillin in the chutzner of the shul, and only then enter the shul. I think the Kaf HaChaim says that if a person is already in the shul, he should go out of the shul and put on his tefillin and come back inside. So again, there's a machlokes: is it preferable to put on the tefillin at home and cover them passing through mavayis hamitunafos, or is it preferable to put on the tefillin in the courtyard of the shul and not to wear them through the mavayis hamitunafos? So Rav Moshe Feinstein says something that I just wanted to start with this because it's such an extraordinary idea. Rav Moshe says in the Dibros Moshe in Masechah Shabbos that when a person wears tefillin, the person becomes infused with the kedusha of tefillin. And Memele Rav Moshe says that it's not going to help to cover the tefillin, because even if you cover the tefillin, but you can't cover yourself, right? You can't walk to shul enveloped in a black garbage bag. That's not shaykh, right? So the person can't be covered even if the tefillin can be covered. Rav Moshe says, so if you can't cover the person, so you're not accomplishing anything by covering the tefillin, because a person who's wearing tefillin is one shtick kedusha, and he has all the dinim. This is a halachic. It sounds to us like, okay, a nice inyan, Ashay Nazach, very beautiful, a person wearing tefillin has kedusha. Wow, so nice. No, Rav Moshe is saying, he's saying la halacha. He's saying something that's mamish la halacha, that a person becomes one shtick kedusha, and he's not permitted to walk in the streets wearing his tefillin, passing by these dumpsters, as it were, because of this problem of mevayos hamitunafos, and therefore would come out, according to Rav Moshe, that he would side with those achreinim that say to put on the tefillin in the courtyard of the shul. So I didn't bring this up to try and tell people what to do, or to be machriya halacha one way or the other. There are poskim on both sides of the discussion, but I'm just trying to bring out the idea of how important and how chashuv the mitzvah of tefillin is, that Rav Moshe holds that a person wearing tefillin mamish becomes kadosh. So with that in mind, I'll go according to the list over here. And again, if anybody has any other questions, you can feel free to ask. I don't think there's no halacha l'Moshe Sinai regarding these questions or the order that they're in, right? Okay. So actually, the first question does involve a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and that is, do black straps matter? How black is black? So as far as that question is concerned, so ritzuas shchayres, black ritzuas, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now, how black is black? I assume that the question is referring to the idea, does the entire ritzua have to be black? In other words, we are all familiar, hopefully, with the idea and with the fact that some people's ritzuas have, I made a bracha already, that some people's ritzuas have little like white spots or streaks or tears, scratches, and that creates a white mara on the ritzua. So does that passel the ritzua? So this is actually bir halacha in Siman Lamed Gimel. The bir halacha raises this issue, and what he's addressing primarily is the following issue: ritzuas have to be a requisite width and a requisite length. So the bir halacha is mesupik. Let's say, for argument's sake, the ritzua shel rosh has to come down until here, about 16 centimeters down from the knot. So let's say beyond that point over here, the ritzua has this white spot. Nistapakna, the bir halacha says he's mesupik if that's going to passel the ritzua. What are the tzadim? One side is, well, if the ritzua has to be black and there's a white spot, so the ritzua is not black, the ritzua is not going to be kosher. On the other hand, says the Mishnah Berurah, the amount of ritzua that I need is black. So if what's after that is not black, who cares? What's the big deal? And dalmi hachi, as we say, that shouldn't present a problem. On the other hand, says the Mishnah Berurah, perhaps you don't say dalmi hachi in this situation, because since there's a din that ritzuas shcheiris halacha l'moshe misinai, so the entire ritzua has to be black halacha l'moshe misinai, and it applies to the entire ritzua. So this shaila he's not the first one to bring this up, the Biur Halacha. This is already discussed by the Buchacher in his Sefer Das Kedoshim on Hilchas Tefillin. It's discussed by Rabbi Sina Mishal in a tshuva. It's discussed by Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld in a tshuva. And so they are noted to say that rubai kekulei. Forever the ritzua is black, so then the ritzua is going to be kosher. So that provides for plenty of leeway. A person could have multiple white spots on his ritzua, and that's not going to present any problem. The Chazon Ish had a different take. He said it's totally in Dinei Erevin of Parutz Meruba ala Oimid and Oimid Meruba ala Parutz, which means that it depends. It's hard to give a shir in Erevin right now, but Al Kol Panim, it's totally in how much of the ritzua is going to be not black and where it's positioned on the ritzua. That's the position of the Chazon Ish. And the fact of the matter is that the Biur Halacha himself is not machriya that it's going to passel the ritzua. He leaves it as a tzarachian. So the fact of the matter is that, again, I'm not here tonight to be kaveya any halachas, but the bottom line is, if a person has such a situation, so for the avar, what he's had until now, so certainly there's what to rely on to be mekel. Person doesn't have to, do any major tshuva before Rosh Hashanah that he hasn't been wearing ritzuas. There are achronim to be soymechan that he was yetzer the mitzvah. On the other hand, the Mishnah Berurah at the end of the day is mesupik about it, and therefore, ideally, a person should have that paint, and he should paint his ritzua l'shem kedushas tefillin, which leads us to a related topic, and that is the idea.
You said there were three opinions.
Rubai kekulai, Paretz Meruba ala Oimid, and kosher. Reb Shlomo Zalman says that if when you look at the ritzua, he kind of compares it to like an esrig or other things in Yiddishkeit, where you look at it, from this length, and if the white spot is not noticeable, so he says then it doesn't really count. The fact that when you hold it up and you examine your ritzua, you see little white spots, that's garnished. He says you look at the overall appearance of the ritzua, and so long as it looks black, so then it's not going to present an issue.
When you say white spots, you mean cracks where the paint is broken away?
It could be anything.
Something on top of the straps?
Something on top is nothing. Something on top you could usually just take off with your fingernail or with a toothpick or whatever it is. Usually that won't present an issue. You could just remove it. But if the ritzua is worn, so it becomes less black. The black becomes faded, it becomes cracked, and white cracks appear. So as I said, this leads us to a related issue. And that is, people ask all the time, well, what's better? Is it better to have the all black ritzuas, or is it better to have the traditional, for lack of a better term, we'll call it traditional ritzuas, which everybody had until 10, 20 years ago. The ritzuas which were black on the outside and white, or the natural color, some sort of natural, related to natural color on the inside. So there is a big misconception. Many people wear the all black ritzuas and they say, yeah, you know why I'm wearing it? I'm wearing it to be yotze the shittas Rambam. Why is that? Because the Rambam says that noihu litfillin, that the back of the ritzua should be, the back of the ritzua and the batim and everything should all be the same color. He says that that's noi tefillin. Interestingly, Agav, in the Frankel Rambam, they bring a girsa that it's gnai tefillin for everything to be the same color. But I think that it seems to be relatively accepted that that girsa is not the correct girsa. The correct girsa is noihu tefillin, that it's nice if everything is the same color and the back of the ritzua is black. So some people say that the reason they're wearing these ritzuas is to be yotze the shittas Rambam. But that's really It's not really the case. And the reason is because all the Rishonim Kulam Pe'echad, including the Mechaber in the Beis Yosef and the Ramah, and many Achreinim and Rishonim before the Mechaber and the Ramah, all say that the minig is not like the Rambam. So it's clear that from the time of the Rambam already and onward, the minig never was like the Rambam. And Memela, if all the Rishonim and all the Achreinim are saying, and the Mechaber and the Ramah are saying that the minig is not like the Rambam, so that means that there's really no inyan to be Mekayim the Shita of the Rambam. Again, if there was no established minig one way or the other, and you have a Shita of Rambam, so then certainly it would be very nice to be Mekayim minig Rambam. But if all the Paiskim for 700 years are telling us that the minig is not like the Rambam, so the minig is not like the Rambam. I don't know. I don't know, I don't know. I asked Rabbi Ratzabi a few questions about Hilchos Tefillin, but that question I never asked him. It's probable that it's in his Shuvas. If you look in Shuvas Eilos Yitzchak, I would imagine that he addresses it. So why did they come up with these all black ritzuas? The reason is because of what we were discussing a minute ago, and that is that if the ritzuas develop any non-black spots, if they develop white spots, so then there's going to be a shaila in the kashrus of the tefillin. According to the Bir Halacha, you might not be yetz of the mitzvah. So a Yiddish cup came up with a great idea. Let's take the ritzua, soak it in black dye. It'll become saturated through and through black. And memela, it'll be like the example I gave this morning, like a piece of chocolate cake. If you cut a piece of chocolate cake and you look inside the cake, it's not white, it's black, because the whole thing is black. So if you do the same thing with the ritzua, you soak the ritzua, you saturate it completely that it's black, so you'll never come to a situation, no matter how, it's not going to be faded, no matter how old or worn out or scratched your ritzua is, you're never going to have a white spot. If you're never going to have a white spot, so then you avoid this shaila. And that's really the reason why these ritzuas were created. It happens to be that al pi Kabbalah, it's brought from the Arizal, that to have the back of the ritzuas black, unrelated to the Rambam. The Arizal says that the back of the ritzua should be black. So there's a fascinating Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai says that, so as we know, the Ben Ish Chai generally followed the minhagim of the Arizal, and he certainly was the greatest mekubal of his time and had many Kabbalistic practices. So it would seem, as a davar pashut, that the Ben Ish Chai would have all black ritzuas, because it's brought al pi Kabbalah to have all black ritzuas. So there's a fascinating sefer that was printed by Ahavat Shalom, Yeshiva of Rabbi Yaakov Hillel Shlita, where they have a sefer which is an exchange of letters. I think it's called Michtam Elio, if I'm not mistaken. It's an exchange of letters between the Ben Ish Chai and Rav Elio Mani. Rav Elio Mani was a Mekubal who lived in Hebron, and he was one of the greatest Mekubalim living in Eretz Yisrael at the time. And the Ben Ish Chai often would correspond with him, and they would discuss halachic issues, Kabbalistic issues, and so forth. So there's a fascinating Ben Ish Chai where he writes in Hilchos Tefillin that he sent the shaila to Rabbi Elio Mani regarding all black ritzuas. What's the minig in Eretz Yisrael? What do the Mekubalim do in Eretz Yisrael? And Rabbi Elio Mani wrote back to him, some wear all black ritzuas and some don't wear all black ritzuas. That's what he wrote back to him. So it's mamish, it's a gevaldige zach. You'd think like, I would have thought it was a davar pashut that all the Mekubalim wore all black ritzuas. That's what it's brought from the Arizal. So, like it would seem to be a no-brainer. But yet, you see that it was so not a no-brainer that the Ben Ish Chai asked, and the response that he got was, 50-50, like very non-committal type of response, and he records it in the Sefer Ben Ish Chai. It's mashma, seems to be very clear that the Ben Ish Chai is not so gung-ho about this minig, but on the other hand, certainly not misnagid to it. So the question arises, why would somebody not wear them? What do you have to lose? If you can avoid the shaila of the Bir Halacha, you could be Mekayim a Rambam, even if it's not the minig, and you could be Mekayim the Inyan al Pi Kabbalah. So what have you got to lose? Just wear them. So there are two primary approaches of the, what we'll call, for lack of a better word, the misnagdim to the all-black ritzuas. The most obvious problem that they have with it is that this is something that Klal Yisrael hasn't done for 2,000 years. And like Me'echatesi, to come today after 2,000 years and start a new way of wearing tefillin.
It's like have a little bit of the time, like Tchelis, and have like a whole decade. Like you weren't asked to do it this way. Now we're trying to make it like this, add this hashivas to it. Like,
no, Tchelis is very different, I would think, because Tchelis is a mitzvah say d'oraisa. If you're missing it, you're missing it, right?
In terms of with Korach, who was saying like let's have the whole thing made out of Tchelis. Like it becomes a design. It comes to like,
yeah, but over here,
the idea, the concept.
But over here, you're doing it because you're being mekayim the mitzvah in a more mohuder fashion, right? Like I'm saying, either you're chapping the Rambam, or you're chapping the Inyan al Pi Kabbalah, or you're avoiding the Shaila. So it would seem to be all good. It's not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the Dimyan is 100%. So again, like I'm saying, the first taina against it is that it's very nice, but l'maisa it's something that everybody could have done, and nobody did. Okay? In other words, just to clarify this point, because this is something that I think is often misunderstood. Today, I'm just giving an example. We computer check all Sifrei Torah. What does the computer check do? The computer check checks for spelling mistakes in Sifrei Torah. What do you mean? How can you do such a thing? 2,000 years they didn't computer check Sifrei Torah. So what kind of chutzpah is this coming around with this new thing of Sifrei Torah being computer checked? So what's the answer? The answer is very simple. Because the Rambam didn't have a computer to check his Sefer Torah with. And the Vilna Gaon didn't have a computer to check his Sefer Torah with. Had they had it, they certainly would have done it. The proof is because all the Gedalim who were alive after the advent of the computer check endorsed it and were very excited about it. So there's nothing wrong with making use of new technology for the benefit of Kiyum HaMitzvahs. So that's a fantastic thing. However, one of the oldest professions in the history of the world is dyeing animal hides. It's something that's been around from before Matan Torah. They were dyeing animal hides. So to have all black ritzuas is something that always could have been done. It's not like computer checking Sifrei Torah. They always could have dyed the hides totally black, and they never did it. Rashi didn't do it. The Mechaber didn't do it. The Aruch HaShulchan didn't do it. Rav Moshe Feinstein didn't do it. And even the Ben Ish Chai, it doesn't seem, like he may not have done it either. The Arizal did it because of this Inyan al Pi Kabbalah, but you see that those who went in the way of the Arizal, who followed all of his minhagim, this one, some yes, some not. So Al Kalpanim, so the taina against it is that in something like this, to go and change a minig would be inappropriate. That's one taina against it. A second taina against it is that there's a Rashi in Moed Katan. Reb Chaim Kanievsky brings this Rashi. The Rashi in Moed Katan says as follows. The Gemara is talking over there about a case where the Ritzua flipped, right? I think many of us are familiar that if a Ritzua flips, there's a whole thing about fasting, and it's a very chamordik inyan. I'll just mention that that's referring only to the part of the Ritzua that's on the head, and only the part of the Ritzua that creates the kesher, the hiduk, on the arm. But if it does flip the Ritzua, meaning that the outside is on the inside and the inside is on the outside, so then it's very problematic. So Rashi says over there, is Hapchale Ritzua the Tefillin, and I quote, Hashocher bifnim. The black part flipped to the inside. The Ritzua shchayra nira bachutz. Halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Because what's the halacha l'Moshe miSinai of Tefillin? Is that the black is nira bachutz, on the outside. It seems from Rashi, again, his lashon is hashocher bifnim. The black side went to the inside. Well, if the inside was also black, so then what happened over here? It seems clear from Rashi that the black side was the outside and the inside was not black. That seems very clear in Rashi. Now the Gemara says you're going to ask that you can make the back of the ritzua any color. So the answer to that question is that einachinami, but not black apparently. They must have made it some other color. They made it green, they made it yellow, or they made it no color. But Rashi is saying that the black part was on the outside. The inside could be any color, any other color.
Could be not painted.
Could be not painted, yeah, that's what we've always done, unpainted.
So the fact that it says the painted side would be...
Hashachar.
So
He says the black side.
Say if you are trying to cut costs and trying to have a scenario like that, which most of Jewish history is like that.
Yeah,
so
correct.
That will explain why...
Why they didn't do it. They couldn't afford it.
It's another penny.
I don't think, that's a little bit hard to swallow.
Is the same thing with Gussus and Gussus also the same? Is that
Yeah, definitely. It's the same thing. They didn't have the technology. Yeah, they didn't have the technology. It's done with metals and presses and the machinery. The machinery necessary for a batim macher bismanenu to set up shop to make gases batim costs tens of thousands of dollars. It's not an exaggeration. Tens of thousands of dollars worth of machinery in order to create batim from gases. So yeah, it's something that they didn't have the ability to do, 100%. So that's so those are the discussions. Now the raya that Reb Chaim Kanievsky brings, so there are those that are doicha the raya, the issue that it's against the minig for 2,000 years. So again, there are those that argue. The bottom line is, I don't think it's a secret. There are those that are pro, and there are those that are anti, and elu ve'elu divrei Kim Chaim. A person should ask his local Orthodox rabbi, and if you listen to your Rebbe, you'll certainly be in good shape. So that's, I think that's the issue of the black ritzuas. Yes?
You're supposed to tuck in your ritzuas?
Yes.
Purposely for the point of not flipping?
Yes. Yes, it's brought down to tuck the ritzua in. There's even those, a lot of people like twirl the ritzua in their belt, right? They do like a loop, and I saw brought down that some people are not so excited about that loop. You should just put it straight through, yashar. But yes, it is brought down to tuck. The Ben Ish Chai, I think, also brings it. They had, a much more complex system.
But was it in order that it shouldn't flip? Is that
I don't know if that's dafka the reason, but it has a number of benefits. Number one, it won't flip. Number two, it usually won't hit the floor if you do that, whereas otherwise it could hang loose. And it's possible, I don't remember, if you look in the Ben Ish Chai, it's Yitachin that he says, Al Pi Kabbalah also, that it should be tucked in. Yeah?
Didn't you say that already from on the head by the Algier?
Yeah.
We were worried about flipping, so why do we care?
Because that's an excellent question. The answer is because we ideally want the shiny black part always out. That's Noi Tefillin, that the Gemara says. Noyein Labar is right. Is that the pretty part, meaning the shiny black part, should be on the outside. So it's all the inyan chamur of his hapchalei ritzua, which we get very nervous about. That's talking only on the head and over here. But be'etzem, it should be everywhere.
So if it's flipped over the outside, I see someone, I don't have to say anything. It doesn't make a difference.
If he'll appreciate if you say something, then great. Otherwise, I usually find that keeping quiet is better. I'm sorry? No, once it's beyond the kesher, as long as it's after the kesher, as long as it's below the kesher, not above the kesher, it's fine. Yes?
Go back to wearing one's tefillin, going to shul.
Yeah.
So, notwithstanding the chashash of the reich ra,
Yeah.
it seems like a great milah to wear your going up the Zohar.
Yes.
Wear one's tefillin.
Yeah, it's a gevaldig gazach, 100%. I'll tell you an amazing thing. It's going to knock your socks off. The Aruch HaShulchan says if a person comes to shul and he's not wearing his talis and tefillin, he should skip the pasuk in Matayvu of Eshtacha ve'el heichal kodshecha b'yirasecha, because it's a sheker. So how can you say the pasuk? So the Aruch HaShulchan says to skip the pasuk. So yeah, of course, if there's no, I was thinking about it, this afternoon. So I was thinking, like, if a person davens before 7:30 in the morning, so then l'chayra, there's really no reason not to wear your talis and tefillin to shul. The streets are still relatively, at least in this neighborhood, relatively calm. I'm saying a reason not to wear talis and tefillin in the street. If a person's going to be bumping in to 1 million people, and there's women and there's children, and it's a whole balagan in the street, so then it's not practical to wear one's talis and tefillin to shul. But if the streets are relatively quiet, it's 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, there's really 100%. It's a gewaldige thing to wear one's talis and put them on in the house. Put them on in the house, and the lashon of the Zohar is passing out through the exit of your home, wrapped, ensconced in your talis and tefillin, is a gewaldige meila. Yeah.
Apart from you said earlier, the bad smell from the garbage bins.
Yeah.
Okay, this is from town, but that's not from walk, and it's not near the streets. That's also a problem?
Yeah, 100% that would be a problem. So that would go back to what I was saying before. It depends on who's in the streets and how many people in the streets and what time of day it is.
For those who go to the Hashkalim, if it's too early to put the tefillin up?
If it's too early, it's too early. So that's what the Kaf HaChaim I referenced earlier. If I'm not mistaken, he says to walk out of shul. In other words, if you're going to shul before the time that you can put your tefillin on, so that's fine. You go to shul, and you could sit and learn for an hour, whatever it is. But when the time comes to put on talis and tefillin, you should go out to the chutzner of the shul, put on your talis and tefillin, and then come back in. So yeah.
And repeat my Torah?
That's I don't know. That's just the Gishmak Aruch HaShulchan to know. If you want to repeat it, you're certainly not going to lose any schar. Yeah.
So a bacher who would ride a bike to school, for example.
Oh, so that's an interesting question. So the question comes up about driving. Somebody's going to be driving to shul. So should you wear your talis, or should you put on your talis and tefillin before you get in the car? So I saw that some say, well, look at the Balei Agola in Lita. The Balei Agola in Lita used to travel wearing the talis and tefillin. So if the Balei Agola traveled wearing the talis and tefillin, why shouldn't you wear your talis and tefillin when you're driving? On the other hand, if I'm not mistaken, if you do some searches, you'll find about people that were given tickets for driving wearing the talis and tefillin because the police officer determined that caused the accident, right? If you have your talis over your arm, you lose a little bit of flexibility, and it could be a little bit dangerous. So actually, one Rav that I asked, I'm not kidding around, I asked him this question, if you should put on your talis and tefillin before you're going to drive. So he told me, and I didn't say anything to him about these tickets and anything. He said, well, if you're asking me, he said, I think you should put on your talis and tefillin at home, and as you're getting in the car, take off your talis, put it down in the passenger seat, drive to shul, and then put the talis back on without a bracha, because driving wearing a talis is dangerous. That's what that Rav told me. So again, hakol lefi inyan. If you work in Tel Aviv, so to drive with your talis and tefillin is a little bit not so practical.
I found it was only a 5-minute drive, but I found that the talit would, the tzitzit would get stuck.
In the door.
In the door, that's
yeah, I've had that.
Yeah, so that's the only problem I had with it.
Yeah, eina chenami. So I mean, I don't know that there's any right answer. I guess it's kafi the individual. If a person feels that he's able to do it, then also you have to realize there's another question of hesach hadas. A person is not supposed to be mesiach das when he's wearing tefillin, but the parameters of what's called a hesach hadas are nebulous. Okay, if a person is going to check the scores of the game last night wearing his talis and tefillin, that's certainly a hesach hadas. It's kalas rosh, whatever you want to call it. It's certainly not appropriate activity when wearing tefillin. But mitzad sheni, if a person is working wearing his talis and tefillin, there's nothing wrong with that. So be'etzem, wearing talis and tefillin while driving, intrinsically, there's nothing wrong with it. But on the other hand, again, if a person feels that it's distracting and it's not practical, so then certainly it's best, I guess it's best to avoid it. But riding a bike, I would think, is worse than driving. Because riding a bike, a person gets schwitzy, and it's, I don't know, again, it depends on the person, but it would seem, my feeling would be that no, it's probably better not to put on talis and tefillin, or even just tefillin, before riding a bike.
And of course, if it's raining,
Oh, so I actually had that written down on my cheat sheet over here to mention that if it's raining, a person absolutely should either not put on his talis and tefillin at home, or be very, very sure that the tefillin are very safe. He's wearing a good raincoat with a hood, whatever is necessary to ensure that the tefillin are not going to get wet, because moisture is the enemy of tefillin. I've seen countless tefillin that got ruined outside and inside due to excessive moisture, and excessive moisture doesn't have to be rain. If a person showers in the morning, or a person goes to the mikveh in the morning, if he doesn't dry his hair properly, you see the chassidim go to the mikveh in the morning, but they don't really have too much hair. So for them, it's not too much of a problem. But for non-chassidim, someone who goes to the mikveh in the morning or takes a shower before shachris is getting into, could get into a major problem if he doesn't ensure that his hair is totally dry before davening. Similarly, and this would apply, like I was saying, to someone riding a bike or even walking to shul potentially, if it's a very hot climate and the person schwitzes a lot, so that's also something to take into account, because schwitz kills tefillin. That's a fact. A person who's a heavy sweater, I'm not saying he shouldn't wear tefillin, but he has to be very cautious. One idea would be to put tissues in they're called sheidelach, the plastic cases. He should put tefillin, not sheitel with a test, but with a dalet, sheidel. It's also Yiddish. He should put a tissue on the base of the sheidelach, and so that way, so first of all, he should leave his tefillin out for a minute or two after davening. He should wipe them down and make sure that they don't have any moisture on them. And it would be a good idea to put a tissue which will absorb some of the moisture in the shadel, so that when he closes up his tefillin, it'll help in that regard. But the tefillin mamish, I've seen dozens of pairs of tefillin that the bottom of the tefillin mamish looks like an inverted soup bowl, because it conforms to the dome of the head, and it just mamish warps.
You use also desiccate that comes in the vitamins and shoes and things like that.
Oh, in the shadel.
Yeah.
I thought you meant you should put it on your head. Okay, no, yeah, in the shadel. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Okay.
No, quick question about
Yeah.
the ashpa garbages in the street.
Yeah.
If there's a couple garbages you pass by, you don't have to look at them.
Correct. So, because it depends on the smell. If the smell is very bad, see here, Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of them are closed. Also, they're small. Also, very often they're in a corner over here in Ramat Beit Shemesh Aleph. We're zeicha to live in a town where the garbage situation is not so disastrous. Although sometimes when you're walking to shul, it's right when they're pulling all the garbage bins out to the street, and that's really not so geschmack. It's not so glad to walk to shul in such an environment. So hakol lefi inyan. But in Yerushalayim, we have these massive green dumpsters which you can smell from 20 feet away. It's mamish. It's not so pashut. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Baruch Hashem. It was the Tefillin activists that got it done. Yeah. Yeah.
The bike would be detected and stuff, but if you're going without a helmet, you wouldn't be wearing a...
That's true. You'd have to make a custom-made helmet that can, if they can make custom-made raincoats, right? So they can make custom-made helmets that can accommodate tefillin. Okay.
But you said,
Yeah.
from Moshe Feinstein, if your base is exposed, it's also sharp.
And a chanami, lefi Rav Moshe, yeah, 100%. Lefi Rav Moshe, it's not so pashut, yeah. Okay, what else do we have over here? Oh, it was here, wearing tefillin to shul. Yeah, sure.
There was a mice that happened where the new parents found it and brought it to Machar and he lit the edge on fire.
Yeah, so that's a different story.
Yeah.
That.
And he said it was a fraud or something? That it was,
Yes, it was a fraud. There's a yid, unfortunately, it would be better if he wasn't a yid. There's a yid who, his hobby is forgeries and the like. He's been caught selling matzahs, repackaging year-long matzahs into Pesach matzah boxes and selling them as kosher lePesach. He's been caught selling lemons in boxes with hashgachas on esrogim. And so one of his business ventures was that he took, you have like chopped meat, right? Like hamburgers. So he took like chopped leather and you like glue it together like a sandwich, not sandwich, sibit, right? Shelving. So he took like that type of thing out of leather, glued it together. So he had one thing of leather. Then he took black plastic strips, and with steam he would just affix these black strips onto these. It's not really leather, but what appeared to be leather, and he sold them. Millions of meters of such quote-unquote ritzuas. So the reason why he was caught was because after a certain amount of time, some people's ritzuas started peeling. And all of a sudden, the guy is looking at his ritzua, and it's like those fruit roll-ups, like it just comes right off. So people started to see that the edge of their ritzua, the black and the white or whatever, were starting to separate, and you just go like that, and the whole thing comes apart. Mamash splits in two. He was actually taken to court. And if you want to read a very beautiful shtickle Torah about all the halachas of ritzuas, written by a female judge in Tel Aviv who went through the whole sugya, she took eduyos from all kinds of rabbanim and mashgichim, and she went into the whole sugya very, very nicely. I enjoyed it, 40 pages. And she paskined that the ritzuas are pasul. And
from Tel Aviv.
Yeah, from Tel Aviv. And I could send you the PDF. And so we have a psak boror from the Bet Mishpat in Tel Aviv that the ritzuas are not kosher. So there's two ways how you can know, not you, how a person could know if chas v'shalom he has such ritzuas. So one way is you'd boil up water and you dip the ritzua into water. Okay, so what's going to happen is it's immediately going to separate. The black strip and the plastic leather other side is going to separate. So that's one way. Whereas with a regular ritzua, that won't happen. And the second way, which is much more exciting, is you could just light the ritzua on fire. If it burns, it's plastic. If it doesn't burn, it's a real ritzua. I'm sorry? Yeah, just the tip gets a little singed. It's okay. So it's very exciting. If you enjoy, for someone who's a pyromaniac, it's a lot of fun. You can mamish burn a whole bunch of plastic ritzuas. So that was, so that happened. That story happened. I think it was less than 10 years ago, 8 years ago, Baruch, something like that.
There are people running around with these ritzuas all the time.
Sure.
It's puzzle for sure, right?
It's actually interesting. So that raises an interesting halachic question. So she paskin that it's puzzle, and a lot of poskim agree with her. Rav Shlomo Miller said it's puzzle. The Eidel Chareida said it's puzzle. There's a lot of poskim that came out and said that it's puzzle. So fascinatingly enough, first I'll shock you and then I'll tone it down. So Rabbi Elyashiv actually held that it's kosher. Wow. But not these ritzuas, because the guy has no ne'emanus. Rabbi Elyashiv held that a ritzua is kosher even if the black is not painted into the leather. Okay? In other words, if theoretically a person has kosher leather, which is ma'ubed l'shma, with all the halachas of ritzuas, and he takes paint and he paints everything on l'shem kedushas tefillin, and he does everything the way it's supposed to be done. And for whatever reason, the paint doesn't absorb into the ritzua. It sits on top as a layer. And like a piece of masking tape, a person could just peel it off. So Rabbi Elyashiv held that that's not a psul in a ritzua, whereas these other poskim held that would passel the ritzua. But Rabbi Elyashiv held that would not passel the ritzua. So the people, who were ki'ilu sticking up for this guy said, what do you mean? Rabbi Elyashiv held it's kosher. But it's not true, because Rabbi Elyashiv held it's kosher. If you have Yereim or Shleimim making the ritzuas with all the halachas and everything being done properly, so in such an instance, it would be kosher. Because sometimes it does happen that there's a problem with the leather for whatever reason, and the taka doesn't go in, and it could peel. But that would be, according to Rabbi Elyashiv, a kosher peeling ritzua. But this guy, Stam, he was doing it in the Ukraine, Olav Hashalom, and in other countries. In Turkey, I think, there were various exotic places where he was making these ritzuas where he wouldn't get caught. So it was being made by goyim. It wasn't mobid l'shma. It didn't have. They would just puzzle in just legamri puzzle.
So are there any kosher yidden who were making ritzuas like that?
No, it happens by accident.
And all of them, the ones you could just peel off like that, they were all.
Well, again, you could have mohuder ritzuas that have that, but generally it happens by accident, not on purpose. They're not making those ritzuas. They're making traditional ritzuas, and for various technical reasons.
Right, but the ones that you peel off the whole.
Yeah, those are all made by this fellow and his imitators.
Good use for toys for chinuch, you know, for toddlers, you know, just
Yeah.
they make it for toys, you know,
Yeah.
they make it like that.
Yeah. Einachinami. Einachinami. Okay. What should we talk about next? The correct placement of tefillin. What if the eyes are not in the center of one's head? Okay, so that, you heard right. Basically, I'll rephrase the question. The question is as follows. The correct placement for tefillin is bein einecha. And the correct placement for the tefillin shel yad is on the muscle, on the lower half of the bone, which extends from the shoulder down to the elbow. Okay, so you have the bone which extends from the shoulder till the elbow. You take the midway point of that bone. You have a certain amount of muscle underneath it. It should be in that area, ideally. That's the place. That's the placement for the ritzua. There are others that hold that the entire raised part of the arm is suitable for the tefillin. The Vilna Gaon holds like that shita, and there are those that say that that's the shita of the mechaber also. Although most places can understand the shita of the mechaber. Not like that. That's a different discussion for a different time. But be that as it may, it's important for the tefillin to be placed in the correct spot, because if the tefillin are not placed in the correct spot, the Mishnah Berurah says tefillin shemunachim shaloi b'mkaiman kimunachin bekisan. If the tefillin are not in the correct spot, so it's like they're in the bag. You haven't really done anything. So having the tefillin in the correct spot is of primary importance. Be that as it may, situations can come up which are problematic, and that is if a person, and there are people that have this, where their body is not typical. A person can have the muscle of his arm higher up. It could be due to an operation that he had or some other reason, so he can have the muscle on the upper half of his arm. Or his eyes, like we were saying in the question, a person can have eyes which are not centered. It's such a thing is shaykh. There are people that have these issues. Or a more common issue is that the tefillin are not supposed to come lower than the hairline. Okay, so the roots of the hair, where the roots of the hair grow, right? I don't know why I'm pointing to my head, because you can't see where it used to be. But some people still have the roots of their hairline in the place where it was. And that's the lowest point that the tefillin are allowed to come to. So what about a person who has an extraordinarily, unusually low hairline? Would he be able to have his tefillin lower, or the opposite? Let's say a person has an extraordinarily high hairline. Would he have to now put his tefillin all the way back up on his head? So Rav Nissim Kirelitz, I found Rav Nissim Kirelitz says that these mekaymis are simanim for the correct placement of where the correct placement of the tefillin are meant to be. If the simanim don't work on him, that doesn't change the makam hatefillin. The makam hatefillin is the same as it would be for a regular person. So he says, so if a person's hairline is within the range of what's considered to be normal, so that then he would have to be makbid on his own head that the tefillin rests in the correct spot for him, because he is what's considered to be normal or regular. But if a person is irregular and his situation is different than standard people, so Rav Nissim says he would not have to be machmir, or he would not be able to be mekel in terms of the placement of his tefillin, whether it's on the arm or the head, and he would have to put the tefillin in the normal place where most people have the tefillin. So that's something to be aware of. I actually had this recently. A bar mitzvah boy was by me in the house, and he had an unbelievably high hairline. I never saw such a thing. His hair, I mean, he had long hair, so it came down. It wasn't noticeable. He looks like a regular kid. But when you're measuring the tefillin, it was like, wow, his hair started like way up on his head, and it mamish created for him what could potentially be a very tiny window of where he can place his tefillin. So according to Rav Nissim, l'chayra would not be a problem, and he'd be able to put his tefillin in what would be considered to be a normal range.
I'm wondering if he holds the same by the pair, because the cheekbone is different for each person. And you should say that it depends on your cheekbone, but what he's saying is that it's just a guideline.
It's possible. I can't say for sure, but it's sensible that it's definitely possible. Yeah.
You mentioned that you're fitting a bar mitzvah boy.
Yeah.
Why is it that there are so many sofer allowed to leave their hands without fitting them on a child or an adult?
Well, if the child or the adult is there.
Kids, did you get your film from the sofer? And he said, yeah. Did he fit it for you? No.
As my Rosh Hashiva.
All the sofer who send them out with the grandparents and they take them to Chutz La'aretz and they're fit for elephant heads.
Okay, so the first answer to the answer to the first half of what you said is what my Rosh Hashiva always used to tell me when I would ask him such questions. He says, "Why are you asking me? Ask the people that do it." That's the first half. As far as sending it with grandparents, so what do you want them to do? The kid is not in front of them. What are they supposed to do?
The sofer should make it so small or so big that nobody can.
Well, if it's fit for an elephant's head, then it's going to be so big. And a chinami. Just Amazah, you should know, I once sent somebody a pair of tefillin, and he called me up, and he was very upset, and he said that I asked for a square kesher, and he sent me a dalet. Okay, I felt terrible, but he was in Chutz La'aretz, and I was here. There was very little I could do about it at the time, so I apologized as best as I could. And then he calmed down. He said, "Don't worry about it. I took care of it." I said, "How do you take care of it?" He said, "Well, I went on YouTube, and I typed in the kesher shel reish, and there are videos there that showed how to do it, so I just undid it and redid it." So I asked him if it said on the video to make sure to say L'Shem Kedushas Tefillin before you begin, and he said that it did. So, okay, so there you go. So don't shoot me for promoting YouTube. I'm not promoting YouTube, but you should just know if you're really stuck, you can find someone who has access to YouTube and ask him to show you how to do it.
Google also helps.
Right. Yeah. So that's as far as the tefillin placement is concerned. Once we're talking about it, I'll just mention that there's a Yid in Borough Park. His name is Rav Reuvain Mendlowitz, and he started a whole campaign approximately 35 years ago, encouraging people to have smaller shel yads. So it's an interesting topic, so I'll mention it for a couple of minutes. What's the idea of Rav Reuvain Mendlowitz's small shel yads? So the idea is as follows. It's brought down b'shem the Shimusha Rabbah. The Shimusha Rabbah was one of the Ga'inim. Some say it's actually Rava from the time of the Gemara, but I think most understand that he was an anonymous Ga'in from the Tkufa of the Ga'inim in the 700s, 800s, 900s. And he says in the Shimusha Rabbah that the tefillin should be etzba'ayim al etzba'ayim, which is 2 etzba'is by 2 etzba'is, which is, according to Reb Chaim Noah, 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters, and according to the Chazon Ish, 4.8 centimeters by 4.8 centimeters, or loosely stated 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters. Now, because of this Shimusha Rabbah, the minhag has become, in our times, in Europe it wasn't like this, but in modern times, if you take a look at standard tefillin, if you measure standard Ashkenazi tefillin at least, they are 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters. That's the standard size of the base of the tefillin. And the reason is, as I said, to be Mekayim this shita of the Shimusha Rabbah. What's the problem? The problem is what we mentioned before, that according to a number of Paiskim, if the tefillin shel yad is going to extend to the upper half of the muscle, so then according to some Paiskim, one is not yaitza mitzvah's tefillin. Now that's very scary, because a lot of people, first of all, are not really aware of this and not really makbid about it, number one. And number two, is for bar mitzvah boys. It could be very difficult to fit the tefillin in the correct area. So what's one meant to do? Sir Barry Shechter said, well, a very simple thing. The idea of having tefillin al etzba'ayim, it's not ma'akev. Even the Shimusha Rabbah doesn't hold that it's ma'akev. Whereas having the tefillin not in the correct spot could be ma'akev according to many Paiskim. So let's weigh the sides here. I could make it etzba'ayim and chap in this nice inyan of the Shimusha Rabbah, or I could, and maybe not be yotzei mitzvah's tefillin, or I could make my tefillin a little bit smaller, increase my chances of being yotzei mitzvah's tefillin, and so I've lost the Shimusha Rabbah. So he encouraged this practice of wearing smaller shel yads. At the time, I remember I was in yeshiva, and it was around the time of our bar mitzvahs, and it was a big tumult at the time you know, there was the pro camp and the anti camp, like everything else, and he had some gedolim that taka backed him. Rav Scheinberg was one of his big backers, and there were many people that purchased those batim. Now, the reason why they didn't become a big hit in the tzibur is because they looked funny, for lack of a better way of saying it. They looked funny because they were small. They were the regular height, so you could fit a regular sized parsha into the tefillin. So it was regular height, but it was smaller. So the proportion was unusual. And therefore, it looked funny, and it didn't really take off. But then they came up with a compromise, and that is that they started making shalyads that are 40 or 41 or 42 millimeters squared. Right? So what's the mila of that? The mila of that is that you still have etzba'ayim according to the shir of Reb Chaim Na, which is, I think, more accepted by more people in Klal Yisrael than the shir of the Chazon Ish. So you're still getting the shir of Reb Chaim Na, number one. And number two, you're still getting it around 20% smaller. So such batim are available, and there are people that have them. They look less unusual, and there are those that have them. Now, Reb Elyashiv actually wore them himself for a different reason, but Reb Elyashiv had them. Rav Scheinberg encouraged many people to wear smaller shalyads, and like I'm saying, there are gedolim that are very pro. On the other hand, there are gedolim that are not so excited about it. Rav Osner was not so excited about it. Reb David Feinstein was not so excited about it. And the question is, why not? Like we were saying before, right? Sometimes, like, what do you have to lose? So the pashtus is because Reb Chaim Kanievsky also, I saw, brought down, he didn't hold that there's any major reason to get them. And the pashtus is because they hold that the Iker Halacha is like the Gra. And like we said before, the Gra holds that the entire muscle is acceptable for the Makam Hanachas Tefillin, and if the entire muscle is acceptable for the Makam Hanachas Tefillin, so then one doesn't really get into a shaila. Even a bar mitzvah boy really doesn't have a shaila. And since the pashtus is like the Gra, and for somebody who looks in the makar of the Inyan, as the Beis Yosef brings it, I believe from the Smak, it becomes, the pashtus taka is like the Gra. So the Ramah is a very big chiddush to say that it has to be on the lower half of the muscle. And therefore they hold that there's no major inyan, a person doesn't have to be so medactic to try and get it. But again, like we're saying, the flip side of the other paiskim is, like, at the end of the day, what do you really have to lose? So why not get it? So, okay, I'm going to leave it at that. There are some that are pro, and there are some that are not quite pro, and either way, like we said before, if a person asks his Rav and follows that advice, he's certainly going to be in good shape. Yeah?
What was Rav Elyashiv's reason for wearing it?
Elyashiv's reason was because his head was, different people have different shaped heads. And Rav Elyashiv's head was shaped such that it wasn't flat on the top. It was more, I wouldn't say like a V, but closer to a V than to being flat. And Memela, Rav Elyashiv had a problem that the tefillin didn't sit well on his head, because he had the Bein Einecha by him was narrow. So Memela, since the tefillin are 50 millimeters wide, and the makim that they were resting on was smaller than that, so they were kind of hanging in midair on either side. And, you know, it was difficult for him to keep them properly placed. So there's a Batemacher who's still around, still active. His name is Elio Gitman, Rabbi Elio Gitman. He put out a very chashuv sefer together with Rav David Morgenstern on the halachas of Batim. And they were very close with Rav Elyashiv. They spoke to him every day for a period of about 8 to 10 years while they were writing their sefer. And Elio Gitman noticed that Rav Elyashiv had this issue with his tefillin shel rosh. So he offered Rav Elyashiv one day, he said, listen, I'm sorry for, butting into your business, but I see that it's problematic and it bothers you. I have an idea. So Rav Elyashiv said, what's your idea? So Elio Gitman said to him, my idea is that I can make a smaller shel rosh. I could make you a 41 or a 42 size shel rosh, so that way you'll still have etzba'ayim lefi Reb Chaim Na, and it'll sit better on your head. So Rav Elyashiv said, sounds good. Let's go for it. There happens to be a printed tshuva from Rav Elyashiv where he says that the Minig Yerushalayim was always like Reb Chaim Na and not like the Chazon Ish. So Rav Elyashiv didn't have a problem going with the Shita of Reb Chaim, no, especially as we said, the Shemisha Rabbah himself says it's not Ma'akiv. So Eliyahu Gitman, on his own, without asking Reb Elyashiv, he figured once I'm making him a Shel Reish that's smaller, I'll make him a Shel Yad that's also smaller. And that's what he did. And he told me that when he gave Reb Elyashiv the batim, he saw that Reb Elyashiv noticed that the Shel Yad was also smaller, and he hesitated for a split second, and then he just let it go, and he taka wore them regularly. So he had a smaller Shel Yad, but not for the reason that we were discussing. Yeah, tell me when to stop. I don't know when I'm supposed to stop. As you said, I can speak, for the next few days. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's for sure. Below the hairline. Oh, below the 4 centimeter. Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's half of that. It's somewhere between. It's around 25 usually. Correct. Yes. That's 100% true. Rabbi Yaakov Hillel wrote an entire kuntris, 100 pages long. It's a tshuva printed in his Sefer Vayoshev Hayom, where he passionately advocates for wearing the two tefillin at the same time, and he answers up. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef has a whole tshuva advocating the opposite position, and Rabbi Yaakov Hillel is very strong on the other side of the equation. So if somebody wants to go through the two tshuvas and try and determine what he wants to do, or he can ask his Rav and choose one way or the other, or just follow his accepted minhag. Good? Okay. Okay.
All right.